not gonna be together. This ain't no damn unity party with punks. This ain't no unity party with people who don't want the true liberation of black people. This ain't no unity party with betrayers and snitchers and hypocrites and weak-minded, weak-blooded, spineless black people. This ain't that kind of party. So you take your raggedy ass on home. But those who want liberation, those who want to see black people really free at last. You walk away from these punctified Negroes unless you unite the like-minded of us, whether we are Christians or Muslims or nationalists or agnostics or socialists. If we are like-minded on reparations and on justice for our people, we are brothers indeed. But a black face ain't gonna make you no brother today. Go ahead. We tired of these black-faced, white-hearted niggas. Go ahead, say that. Masquerading as though you love your people. We see you.
Okay, earlier was talking about control our own narrative as African people, Israelite. Could you give me a good example of that?
That's a good question. So I know a lot of people are familiar with terms like black on black crime. Black on black crime is a term typically used to undermine the legitimate cries of justice typically when a police officer murders an unarmed black woman, man, or child. So they use the statistics of black on black crime without putting in proper context. So the proper context would be that all people commit homicides pretty much against their own people at the same rate. It's an environment issue. It's not that black people are predisposed to be violent or hate each other. It's an environment issue. So white people kill white people at the same rate. Asian people kill Asian people at the same rate. Hispanic people kill Hispanics at the same rate, but we never hear white on white crime. We never hear Asian on Asian crime or Hispanic on Hispanic crime. We only hear black on black crime. So that's a narrative that definitely needs to be told in proper context. Also, there's misleading information that comes out in regards to how many black men are in prison versus how many black men are in college. A lot of people have heard the narrative that there are more black men in prison than in college, but that's simply not true. There are actually, according to the numbers, if you check the statistics, the prison statistics, and weigh those against the Department of Education statistics, what you'll find is there's actually twice as many black men in college than in prison. So these are things that we sometimes run with because we're getting a perspective from someone who has an agenda, like I spoke about before. So if you have an agenda to keep prisons filled up or to share a certain narrative, then, the numbers will be skewed. And sometimes you can take statistics that are true statistics, but you can give them in a context that makes what you're presenting actually not factually true.
So instead of legislation, in my opinion, it takes education. The whites have to be re-educated so that the racism that they have in their heart can be eliminated, and our people have to be re-educated so that we will know how to do something for ourselves instead of waiting for others to do it for us all the time. Well, how will that re-education be brought about? Well, just as in World War II, this country could use its news media to propagandize and make the whole American public love the Germans and the Japanese, rather love the Russians and the Chinese and hate the Germans and the Japanese. And then after the war, they changed it and made the American public love the Germans and love the Japanese, hate the Russians and hate the Chinese, which shows that they can make the American public love whom they will and hate whom they will. And that same process can be used to re-educate the American public and show white people how to love black people and show black people how to do something to stand on our own feet and solve our own problems.
Everybody's going for something. We alone, there are too few of us. There are too many men up there with all their cop cars and everything.
That's what they're always telling you. Never let your enemy tell you how many of you there are. Never let the man that you're against form your opinion. This is the trick that's played on everyone who's oppressed. The first thing, an occupation, when you have a revolution in the country, the first thing you take over is the radio. And then you start telling the people, everybody, the war is over. And so all of them surrender. No, they believe that thing right there. And once they take that over, they start telling you where you are and where they are, and you fall right in line. It's plain thought control. The majority of the American people aren't segregationists. That the majority of the American people aren't imperialists. But the government is, the structure is, the power faction is. So how then do all the majority go along with it? Because those who sit in power over the television, over the radio, and over the press is constantly telling those who are the masses how free they are, and how this they are, and how that they are.
With skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like the criminal and the criminal look like the victim. Right now in New York, we had a couple cases where the police grabbed the brother and beat him unmercifully, and then charged him with assaulting them. They use the press to make it look like he's the criminal and they're the victim. This is how they do it. And if you study how they do it here, then you'll know how they do it over here. It's the same game going all the time. And if you and I don't awaken and see what this man is doing to us, then it'll be too late. They may have the gas ovens already built before you realize that they're hot.
All right, here we go. All right, my bad, y'all. Here we go. You see the topic. Let me make sure that the audio is good. Last time I sat up here for 3 hours and I was cooking last live stream, but I had the wrong damn mic set up. So let me make sure I'm good. Hold up. All right, we good. We good. So as you can see what the topic is today, we're going to debunk some of these myths. The 1350, the black fatigue, the black culture of crime, all these different things that are used. That's why I use those clips from Malcolm X, just to remind people and set the tone of how media is able to manipulate narratives, manipulate the masses with misinformation. And you see in that clip that I did from years ago, where I explained how even statistics that could be true number-wise, but out of context or factually still incorrect. So we're going to get into all that. That's why we have the response of the new black media, the independent, underground, grassroots, new black media that can respond in real time, correct narratives, push the proper narratives, disseminate information and whatnot. So if you're not familiar with the 1352, that's a narrative that a lot of these alt-right, 4chan, racist, extreme white folks that, are pushing false information do. And the way it goes basically is 13%, which is the population of Black Americans, are committing 52% of the homicides or 52% of the crimes or whatnot. Sometimes they'll say 6%, referring to the population of Black males. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to dispel and debunk and show you how that is incorrect. For many reasons, it's incorrect. Number one, we are not 13% of the population. The last time I checked, the numbers were 15%, just over 50 million. So that's number one. But that's cool. I get it. They're using stats that were apparently from the past or whatnot. But matter of fact, you know what? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna let me all right, here we go. So to dispel it, just to show you how simple this is to dispel, I'm gonna let one of their own children dispel this shit for them. Here's what we're gonna do. A child can dispel this myth. But the problem is, see, the people who disseminate a lot of this false information, they know it's false information, meaning the talking heads. the media, the politicians, they know it's misinformation. They just know the masses won't check. They know they're just giving raw meat to those who want to believe it, whether it's true or not, just so they could justify how they already feel. So we're going to go ahead and let a child. This is child's play. Let's go.
15% of the population and 50% of the crime, you need to get fact checked, and I'm about to do it to you. In 2016, white people committed 70% of the convicted crime, and black people only committed 27%. Then in 2017, white people committed 68% of the reported crime, and black people only committed 26%. And in 2024, white people committed 53% of the reported crime, while black people only committed 25%. So this narrative on 13% of the population, 50% of the crime is wrong.
Hold up. Now that's just a very, very simple. That's just a very simple way. If 60, 70% of the crime, I know we're going to get to the per capita. I know they always like to throw the per capita, but in raw numbers, raw data, 70% of the crime is committed by white Americans. So therefore, you can't have 50% of the crime also being committed by black Americans or black people, because that's 120, 130%. So that alone lets you know that it's cap.
You know who actually commits 50% of the crime? White people. But guess what stat black people are 13% of the population and 50% in? Exonerations. You know, when they're wrongly convicted, all you're doing by spreading this fake fact.
So here we go. That's another factor that you'd have to factor in. But there's more. There's actually more to the numbers. I'm going to let some other people break it down, then I'm going to go ahead and rehash it. But here we go. Just to put more context on those numbers, the 13%, the 50% that they always speak about. I'm going to let these brothers break it down.
Per capita, they love to throw out the 1350. When a lot of these racists or white supremacists use per capita, they love to throw out the 1350 stat, which is completely false, by the way. I'll debunk it really quickly. What they are referring to is the 2019 FBI data stats. Now, first and foremost, this is only talking about arrests, not convictions, no going to trial. And if you didn't know, black people are exonerated at the highest rates. In fact, they cover over 50%.
That is the main thing that I hear a lot of those like grifters, or I don't even know what the fuck they are anymore, just racist. They're more so just pointing at the numbers and saying, look at this, and not stating the actual context behind the numbers. You feel me? And that, I feel like, just shows where a lot of people's head is at with this shit, is that they're not willing to sit there and do the extra research. They're just taking whatever information they get and just believing it as fact. Give it a buck. Anybody who's just taking any information like that and just believing it's fact like that, I don't feel like they should be a part of society, bro.
So let me go into that a little bit more, because one of the things that you have to understand when they say the 1350, as you can see, we've already seen the numbers. So it couldn't even be true, because that would be about 130% if you totaled black crime and white crime, or what they're saying black crime is. Just by the numbers, it doesn't work. But as stated, and as you can see on table 43 on the FBI .gov statistics that they like to use, the 50% are only arrests. That means, yes, 13% of the population, black people, are accused of doing 50% of the crime. Accused, not convicted, accused, which indicates over policing. But not only is it only accused, 50% of exonerations are also black people. So that alone, you know, has to bring the number down. If they're saying we're 50%, but we're also 50% of exonerations, that means by default, that makes it 25% less true, right? That's just by their logic, by taking the numbers as they present them. Now, the exonerations would actually even be lower than 50% if it wasn't for income disparity and justice or injustice in the way that, you know, bail, things like that. So I'll give you an example. So if 50% is the exoneration rate now, keep in mind that some people will still plead guilty to lesser crimes because it will get them out of jail. So if they don't have the money to be able to get bail, or they don't want to sit, you know, the 60 days for the speedy trial, they got to get back to work. They got to get back on, whatever the case may be. they'll still plead guilty to something they didn't do in a lesser, a lesser degree. So like maybe they got arrested for robbery, but hey, you want to get out of jail right now? We don't really know. We don't think we have enough evidence to really get a conviction. So take a theft charge. It's a misdemeanor and you can go home. A lot of people will take deals like that. So really, that number would probably be closer to 65, 70. So just by the numbers, though, we don't have to take that into account. But just by the fact that the exonerations of 50%, that we're only talking about arrests, not convictions, that lets you know that Black people are not committing over 50% of the crimes. But then let's talk about the type of crimes that Black people do commit. Uh-oh, I forgot one of my slides. Let's talk about that for a minute. Typically, the crimes that we do lead in disproportionately per capita, if they want to be real about it, it's more crimes of survival. Yeah, it might be theft, it might be robberies, not even, I don't think robberies, but it's pretty close. It is overrepresented, I'd say that. We're talking about nonviolent drug crimes. We're talking about things that people do when they have to survive. Things that they only do, typically, generally, when they have to survive, not as a cultural reflection of who these people are. If you want to get a cultural reflection of who people are, then take what they do, no matter what their conditions economically, social status wise. Meaning, let's think about the crimes that white people overwhelmingly are overrepresented, meaning per capita, for their percentage of the population is much higher, or the crimes are much higher than the percentage of their population. So if they're 30% of the population, they're not just doing 30% of these particular crimes. I'm talking about crimes like rape, incest, familicide, kidnapping, hate crimes, child porn, bestiality. They be representing, they overrepresent when it comes to that. They're all over the boards. They're scoring triple doubles when it comes to that kind of shit. So you want to talk about per capita, you want to talk about culture of crime. I didn't want to get ahead of myself. We're going to go back to that. Let's go ahead and dispel some of this 1350 some more. We're going to get back to that. We're going to get to the culture of crime. I'm going to show you some things. Matter of fact, I got to load up one more slide. I'm going to show you some things. And what we're going to do is make very clear today who actually participates in crime as a culture. Meaning it's embedded in all parts of society. It's celebrated. It's just what they do no matter what their conditions are. See, the crimes that we actually lead in are crimes that are only typically committed when necessary. Meaning middle class, upper middle class Black people aren't doing drug slanging and, the type of things that maybe if you're on the bottom and you really have to survive are doing. The crimes that they do them no matter what their economic class are. They could be the poor white trash to the Epstein class, and they're still touching little kids at a high rate. So let's just be real. But let's get back to the 1350 debunking. Let's let a good white man do it. How about that?
One thing that drives me crazy are people going online and spouting hate and then seemingly backing up their hate using convincing but ultimately false statistics. So once again, let's talk about data over dogma. Every now and then you'll hear the same statistic tossed around, usually online, sometimes even in political debates. 13% of Americans are Black, yet they commit 50% of the murders. It's called the 1350 lie. It sounds neat. It sounds inconclusive, but it's a lie. Yes, numbers show up in FBI arrest data just like this, but that's all it is, arrest data. And arrest data reflects who gets policed, where, and how aggressively. It does not tell you who is inherently violent. Here's what this terrible talking point leaves out. Black neighborhoods are policed more heavily than white ones. More stops, more searches, more arrests, and that inflates the numbers. Crime itself is overwhelmingly interracial. The 1350 claim talks about murder, but ignores categories where white people dominate the arrest stats, things like rape and arson and vandalism and drug possession. And most white victims are killed by white offenders. And most black victims are killed by black offenders. That's not about race. That's about the reality that violence usually happens within communities. And then poverty, whether it's concentrated like in rural Appalachia or urban Orlando, crime rates rise. That's true across every race in every place. The difference is that Black Americans are more likely to live in poverty because of deliberate policies like redlining, like segregation, like disinvestment. So no, this isn't about biology. It's about policy. And don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. The people who peddle this 1350 myth don't want you to see the bigger picture, because once you do, the story changes. It's not those people are the problem. Those people are the enemy. It's our systems are the problem. And that means our leaders and our choices are responsible. So why does this matter? Because lies like this don't just stay online. They justify racial profiling. They stigmatize people who've never committed a crime, millions of people. And they let extremists wave around a spreadsheet as if it's scripture, but it is not scripture. Scripture itself is clear. Jesus of Nazareth.
All right, that's enough of that. Enough of that. But he was saying some facts. So let's go ahead and go into some of those things that he was saying. Other reasons why that number is skewed is because the reporting is not accurate. And there are crimes that are committed that aren't reported, or because they're justified in court. Like, for instance, Kyle Rittenhouse caught a triple. He caught 3 bodies. Those should be on that should be on the scoreboard. It's not on the scoreboard. George Zimmerman's not on the scoreboard. You know what I'm saying? Rick Chow is not on the scoreboard. So some of these, Daniel Penny, not on the scoreboard. Vehicular homicides through DUIs, which is like 80% them and hundreds or tens of thousands at least bodies a year, they don't count those as homicides. So they can skew the numbers to make it look like a certain thing when it's really not. So a lot of numbers that should be on their side as crimes aren't. Look at Jeff Epstein. I was going to get into that later, but I'll just say it right now. Thousands of victims, thousands of clients in his little black book. None of them have been arrested. None of them have been charged or convicted. Also, let's get back to the over policing. So there's when I was in college, I remember some of these stats that I read. So black people and white people do drugs at about the same rate, meaning percentage wise, the percentage of black people who use drugs regularly and the percentage of white people, it's about the same rate. The only difference is maybe 1 or 2% higher for white people, but overall it's about the same. However, black people are arrested 4 times as much for drug charges. So they're done at the same rate, but somehow black people are arrested 4 times the rate, meaning that our communities are over policed, meaning that we're seen as guilty for something or, suspected of crimes at a higher rate, when they will get passed up and they could be committing crimes. They might get a warning, so it'll never get into the record. So same rate of drug usage, 4 times higher arrests for black people. Also, if convicted, a black person is likely to do 60% more time. So 4 times the arrest for the same crimes, 60% the time. So these kind of things will factor into this 1350 narrative and easily debunk it. But let's go ahead and talk about per capita, since they love that per capita word so damn much, right? You love per capita. Let's look at per capita. Let's check out per capita. All right. So white men make up 28% of the population. And these are the numbers that they never spew these numbers. They spew numbers that really have nothing to do with them. They spew the black on black crime, which is another myth. There's no such thing as black on black crime unless you say there's a such thing as white on white crime, because black people kill each other at about the same rate as white people, about the same rate as Hispanics and Asians. Meaning that most black crimes, or most black people who do crimes, victimize other black people. Most white people who do crimes victimize other white people. Most Asians who do crime victimize other Asian people, because it's called proximity. But anyway, let's get back to the per capita. So 28% of the population is doing 75% of incest perpetration. That means like molesting a family member. 75% of those molestations, trigger warning, are by 28% of the population. So per capita, they're overperforming. You know what I'm saying? They're doing 3 laps. They're really represented 3/4. So if you hear about 4 incest perpetrators, you could bet money that 3 of those are white people, white men. Prostitution Johns, meaning those who are patronizing prostitutes. 65%. Representing. Hey, represent for the culture. Huh? Represent for the culture, y'all. What else we got? Oh, PDF files, 65%. Now, keep in mind, not only is that over twice their population, so they're overperforming, right? Per capita. Not only that, but let's just remember that that's a low number, because the Epstein files cats are all free for these past however many decades, however many of them thousands that were patronizing the children that Jeffrey was supplying. They haven't been charged, so they don't even count on these stats. The majority of the Catholic Church grapes are not factored in here. We're probably about 80% if we put both of those. Easy. The Boy Scouts, they're not factored in here. Right? Okay. What else we got? Kidnappers, 60%. Overall grapers, 60%. But remember, that's a low number. They're lowballing over there, because we've seen plenty of different situations. Remember that little white boy at that college was caught in the act. And the judge said, hey, we ain't even going to charge you. We don't want to ruin your college experience. You know what I'm saying? He was in college graping, and the judge said, hey, we don't want to ruin that for you. We don't want to put a pause on that. Do your thing, King. So he didn't even get charged. He didn't even get convicted. There's a lot of stories like that. So that number is definitely higher. NFA violators. What's NFA? I don't know. It's probably something diabolical. Child porn arrest. The last numbers I saw on that was more like 71%. I think these numbers are lowball. Or maybe they just went up in the past few years. And the mass shooters, 50%. I don't believe that one either. These are low numbers. You want to do the per capita. So what they're doing is they're lowballing their numbers and they're fluffing our numbers. Believe that. Let's get to the ADL, an unlikely ally, I guess, on this topic. Let's see what they have to say about this real quick. According to the ADL, the number 13 used in conjunction with either the number 52 or 90 is shorthand reference to racist propaganda claims by white supremacists against African Americans to depict them as savage and criminals in nature. In this numeric shorthand, the number 13 refers to the purported percentage of the U.S. population that is African American. The number 52 is the alleged percentage of all murders committed in the U.S. that are committed by African Americans. Some white supremacists use the number 50 instead of 52. Similarly, White supremacists claim that the number 90 refers to percentage of violent interracial crime alleged committed by African Americans. Some white supremacists cite the 1994 National Crime Victimization Survey produced by the Justice Department as evidence for the percentage. However, this figure does not show up in the survey itself and is not considered an accurate one. In any case, it could be noted that the vast majority of violent crime is intraracial, committed by the person of the same race, basically race to race, the same race. White supremacists typically employ references to 13 by itself, 1350, 1352, or 1390 in response to social media posts and the comment sections of news stories about crimes which the suspected perpetrators African American. In some instances, white supremacists use the number as the purported police radio code, using language like "we have a 1390 in progress." So that's just a little bit more, just to let you know, like what I'm saying, what other people are saying when they're debunking this. It is backed, by sources, right? Or you could just check the FBI the stat table 43 yourself, and you'll see that those are arrests, and that alone lets you know that, especially when you backtrack that with exoneration rates, then that alone lets you know that it would not be possible. So they're not even talking about convictions, but they'll imply that they are. But let's get to we just seen some of the crimes that they like to lead, that they're leading the, you know what I'm saying? They're popping on the scoreboard with these. They mass shooting and child porn watching and raping and NFA, whatever that is, and kidnapping, pedophiles, tricking, and having sex with animals at high rates. But since they like to act like it's us who have a culture of crime, let's talk about culture of crime. Culture. I mean, that's just something that you do. It's within your nature. It's part of your practices and customs. Like I said, the things that we lead, the crimes that we do actually lead in, are typically, not exclusively, like sometimes, there's nothing I'm saying is I'm saying this is always the case. I'm speaking in generalities. So most of the crimes that we lead in, like I said, are crimes of necessity, crimes of survival, I'll say. Meaning if you're poor, then you might do extra things. You might take some risk. You might have to bend the law, break the law. It's no different than what they were doing in the 30s and the 20s. The Irish and Italians and Polish and Jewish and all these other white organized criminals were doing. They were doing it out of necessity. But they continue to carry on and do it. So that would make it more cultural. The crimes that we lead in, it's not the upper echelons of us doing these things, it's the people that need to, for the most part. But when we talk about them and the crimes they lead in, this is a cultural practice. The Catholic Church sexual abuse crisis is a global institutional scandal. This is their biggest church. This is their spirit. This is the Pope. This is, you know what I'm saying? The Vatican. This is their biggest spiritual, religious institution. Sexual abuse is a global institutional scandal involving decades. Is it only decades? Is it only decades, for real? We're sure it's not centuries. Like I said, they like to under report. Because if they told you the truth, it would be so damn disgusting that you wouldn't even care about what they're saying. Why would you care what they think about you if you really understand their history? And I don't say that as somebody who hates white people. I say that as somebody who's a realist, who's just not going to go for the gaslighting, who's just going to tell the truth and show these facts, and you can take it or leave it. But, okay, decades, that's what they say. Decades of widespread abuse of minors by clergy and systematic cover-ups by church authorities. That is a culture that is institutionally and systematically operating. The scale of the impact. Remember, they're going to downplay the numbers. Thousands of victims, studies identified thousands of survivors globally. Thousands, okay. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Okay. Predominantly young victims. Most victims were boys under 14. Remember, this is a church. I'm pretty sure it's not just the Catholic Church, but it definitely is the Catholic Church, right? So this is their church. This is an institution. This is a staple of who they are at their most highest spiritual level. It's supposed to be, right? This is what they're about globally. That's culture, because that's not something that you're doing for survival or because of circumstance or environment, right? If you're selling drugs, yeah, that's an environment circumstance situation, right? Meaning that if you're not in that environment or circumstance or have that necessity, you're probably gonna be doing different things because it's not part of your culture. It's part of what you had to do, not who you are. But when we speak about some of these egregious crimes that they like to sweep under the table, we're talking about people who are doing it from all types of income levels. The trailer trash in the Epstein class, the churchgoer, the atheist, the Democrat, liberal, the conservative, Republican, the independent. Because it's part of the culture. What else we got? Severe trauma, declining attendance, institutional cover-ups, secret reassignments. So they have the system. They've been doing it so long. They have mastered how to avert accountability. They got a system in place just for that. Secret reassignments. Dioceses, I don't know what that, I might not even be saying that right. Quietly moved accused priest between parishes. Silencing survivors. Like I said, these numbers are lower. Okay, we're only speaking about the ones who survivors spoke up and it was taken to account and audited and recorded. We're not talking about the ones who never said anything, or the ones that were hushed when they did say something, or the ones that said something, maybe they got it off their chest, but it was never counted because they resolved it without it getting to the point to where they had to acknowledge it. Ignoring warnings. Oh, hold up. Here we go. Silencing survivors. Bishops use non-disclosure agreements with financial payouts. Meaning that, when, like I said, avoid accountability. That never gets put on the record. You got an NDA in a bag for you. Hold that. Ignoring warnings. Top Vatican officials repeatedly downplayed documented allegations. Lack of oversight. Credibility accused. Clergy frequently avoided criminal prosecution. Like I said, avoiding accountability. So I can go on and on. We could do more about this, but you know what I'm saying? I'm just showing you that, you can't show us doing crime in an organized fashion on large scales. Not because we're not capable, because it's not in our culture. Let's keep moving. Boy Scouts of America. See, this is institutional. This is systematic. This is cultural. Right? You want to talk about the culture of crime. That's what we're talking about, right? Right? All right. Culture of crimes, right? Okay. Boy Scouts of America, which changed its name to Scouting America, rebranded, right? Trying to wipe that smudge. Underwent a historic bankruptcy due to more than 82,000 sexual abuse claims filed against the organization. 82,000. That's a football stadium. That's a college football stadium. That's just the ones we know about. Because as you could, Catholic Church, I'm pretty sure they learned something from that. So they're, avoiding and matrix dodging and all that kind of shit. But, the ones that have been reported is 82,000, enough to bankrupt them. They went bankrupt because they couldn't stop touching little boys. Think about how diabolical that is. Think about how nasty of work that is, that they bankrupt themselves because they couldn't stop touching little kids. That's cultural. Or is it necessary? Is that a crime of survival? To survive, do they have to touch little boys? Probably not. But who knows? They bankrupt themselves to do it. So maybe in their mind they do. But that's culture though, right? 2.4 billion in a settlement to compensate victims was cleared to proceed by the U.S. Supreme Court. They had to get to the Supreme Court. They had to take it to the top elevator all the way to the penthouse to resolve this shit. This is cultural. This is systematic. This is institutional. Scope of the abuse, the organizer's own internal records. So this is what they, procured, which of course, you know what they did? They cut fat. They shrunk the numbers. They underreported. They did. But of course, their own internal records, sometimes referred to as the perversion files, revealed thousands of allegations dating back to the 1940s. The 1940s, man. They was birthing in jazz, you know what I'm saying? Ragtime and shit. It was ragtiming with it. Over 12,000 children assaulted. That was in the 40s. You know what I'm saying? Good jazz, prohibition, and little boys, I guess. That's part of their culture. Not the jazz part. Okay. Settlement 2.4. We already seen that. I'm just showing you this is, if you want to talk about a culture of crime, then let's talk about. Let's really break it down. Let's really look at it. Let's really investigate this shit. Let's really bring some receipts. See what kind of cultures we're dealing with over here. The Epstein culture. Sex trafficking and abuse operations spanned over 2 decades. Lie, longer than that. Primarily taking place from the late 90s through at least 2017. When did they stop? You think because Jeffrey Epstein is, quote unquote, out of here one way or another? He's out of here. He's out the way. He's gone. He's laying low. Nevertheless, you think it stopped because of that? You think it just stopped in 2007? Come on, man, stop it. According to unsealed FBI memos, Epstein is confirmed to have harmed over 1,000 victims. Over 1,000. We know that's a low number. So we know it's a few thousand at least, which means that there's at least a few hundred clients who aren't being factored in to stats like this. See, the Epstein allies who were clients, they're not in these stats right here. So yeah, they're cooking the books. Let's get back to where was we at with this shit. Epstein. The files detail a sprawling network. It's a network institution. Remember, like this is a billionaire dude. Reportedly, they say was allegedly a Mossad agent, an asset of Israel. So he's at the top. This is higher than just some preachers at some fathers or whatever at the Catholic Church. This is higher than the Boy Scout captains or generals, or whatever you call them. or the white trash in a trailer somewhere eating a mayo sandwich, smoking meth, touching little kids. This is someone who is at the top of the food chain. 1%. Best buds, BFs, with your boy, Trump, and others who are in the administration. So this is, if that's not a cultural thing, that's systematic, that's institutional. That crosses different classes. It's not just like the poor people are doing it when they get in a better situation, they stop touching little kids. It's not one of those. So this is a cultural thing. This is just what they do. If we're going to talk about culture of crime, then we should really talk about what the culture of crime actually is. Who are actually those who have a culture of crime? Now, what they'll do is they'll try to make these things legal, so then it's not criminal. And these are different things that they work on, which makes them look less criminal. They'll just, in a few years, if they can, they've already been making moves to do so. It's just minor attracted now. It's not really pedophile. Nah, it's just, we'll just call it, inappropriate touching. They do things like that. But anyway, so the file, I already said that part. Here's a summary of the length. Okay, so duration and scale of abuse. Length of time. The trafficking operation persisted for roughly 20 to 25 years. While early investigations identified victims abused between 2002 and 2005, records and survivor testimony indicate his criminal conduct, including child sexual abuse material, continued through at least 2017. At least, I'm gonna say probably to 2000. I would say this has been going on, or will 2040. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna keep going. Victims, at least 36 victims who are minors. Now, and listen, they've been redacting the hell out of those files. So they're protecting. They've literally have been protecting the clients and associates of Jeffrey Epstein. But even the stuff that has came out has been nasty work. And remember, these emails and stuff that they, like, if you've looked into it, some of the different places where they will share these things, because it was, or may still be public, even though it's heavily redacted. Like the things they talk about more than just sexually abusing. They talk about torturing. They talk about schmurder, hunting people, black people, that is. Like they talk about some gruesome shit. They're not recorded in those stats because they haven't been arrested. So as much as they try to fluff up the numbers when it's us and lie and gaslight, they undermine and minimize their own numbers. But the truth is the truth. Culture of crime, though. That's what we're focused on right now. Culture of crime. Per capita. Culture of crime. Let's talk about the prohibition. Culture of crime, right? Prohibition catalyzed the transformation of American organized crime. Organized crime. It transformed the shit. The prohibition did. From localized loose street gangs to highly structured multi-million-dollar national business syndicates. That's institutional. That's systematic. That's cultural. Shift to organized business. Corporate structure. Mobs transitioned from petty extortion rackets to corporate-style entities. They hired accountants, lawyers, logistics experts to manage international supply chains, shipping, and large-scale manufacturing. That's culture. That's systematic. That's enterprise. And in order to do that, because they didn't just do it themselves, that means that they had to have politicians in their pocket who were participating and supporting. They had to have law enforcement on their side, participating, not just local law. The different vice squads and different federal agencies would have had to participate. You don't get that big without that. And it means that they also, since they had international supply chains, that means that there's other heads of state globally. That's culture, right? Let's go. Come on, man. Wealth accumulation. Gangsters amassed unprecedented wealth. Kingpins like Al Capone brought in an estimated 60 million to 100 million annually. This is in the 40s. 60 million to 100 million. That would be like billions by today's standard. He'd be a Billy. He'd be a Billy Block. Billy on. You want to talk about culture of crime? And remember, like, it didn't just stop. Like, okay, we were speaking about black crimes and what the kind of crimes we lead in, crimes of survival or whatnot, typically done by those who need to, but that's not the case here. They never stopped. They only grew. They only widened and scaled what they're doing. They only flipped it into other elements to elevate. JFK's family, his daddy was in the prohibition shit. He was in this mob type shit, this organized shit right here, nigga. This right here. He was doing this right here. He took that money wisely. I'm talking about JFK's dad, I want to say, parlayed it by getting his sons all educated in the type of universities, the Ivy Leagues, that they can hobnob and network, get a good education and network. And, he was able to parlay it into presidential son, other people in government. They ended up, clipping them, but they were able to transition that mob money basically into presidency. And that's not the only time it's happened. It happened again in 2016. Donald Trump's grandfather was also mobbed up during this era. That's where they got their money. I want to say something to do with prostitution. This is Trump's grandfather. Parlayed that money to his son, Fred Trump, who made a fortune not being, still on that mob shit, but he did it in the real estate. Still wasn't legal, but it kind of was. And then he parlayed it into Trump. Trump parlayed it into presidency. Is Trump not committing crimes? He's rich. Is he not committing crimes? He's still committing crimes. This is culture. That's what I'm saying. Culture. Culture of crime. Systematic corruption. Syndicates bot protection by funneling millions into bribing police chiefs, judges, federal agents, and politicians. Didn't I just say that a minute ago? Okay. You don't amass fortunes like that illegally without doing things like this, without the cooperation. So this means on every different level of income and different level of in different societal groups, they're all in together now. They're all cream with it. Cash rules. They're with the shits. So this is culture. Like, you want to speak about, so it's a deflection is what it is. It's a projection. When these cats look at us and say that we have a culture of crime, it's projection. That's what it is. You know, I know why it's projection, because we don't have a culture of crime. Let's talk about it. Let me see what the prompt was on this. Here was the prompt. I just put this in the AI. Historical black organizations targeted by FBI. Why are none of these criminal organizations? Historical black organizations targeted by FBI, none of them are criminal organizations. So when they talk about all this, like, oh, you guys aren't accountable, you need to fix these problems in your community, we're the only ones who actually actively, consistently do address our actual issues in our communities. Other communities don't do that. Where's the group that's eradicating pedophilia in these white communities? Where's the groups that are trying to tame these school shooters? Where's these organizations? There's dozens of black organizations in every city that's addressing different issues. You just don't hear about them because they're not going to highlight that because they don't really want to fund that. I know because I was in the streets as an activist for years, mentoring, advocacy for youth, different grassroots organizations. We had to get it out the mud. I went to the Seattle City Council and I gave a good little speech backed by numbers, and we were able to release some funds for grassroots, social services, but they cut those funds after a year. And we were getting busy having some things popping, results, tangible results. They cut the funding. They do that all the time. And so, to act like we don't address these issues is just straight up cap. And when some of these organizations do get successful and big, they get targeted. Black Panther Party, viewed as a prime threat by COINTEL. Southern Christian Leadership Conference, FBI relentlessly surveilled. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, FBI heavily monitored. Why are you monitoring church organizations, nonviolent organizations, Black Panther Party, who, they're toting their guns, which is their right. Second Amendment. But what were they doing? Food programs that turned into WIC and whatnot. Free breakfast. Police watch, making sure that the police are doing their job properly. They were doing things that by today's standard, we would call social work, education. Yeah, their tone was aggressive because it had to be. But they weren't breaking the law. Starting clinics and hospitals like they did here in Seattle. Education centers. This isn't organized crime here. Meanwhile, at the same time, for the white criminals, they're politicking with politicians, federal agents and judges, police chiefs, international supply chains. But we're criminalized for trying to make our communities better. So you want to talk about 1350 black fatigue per capita? Nah, let's get the real narrative, the real context. Universal Negro Improvement Association. This is in the 20s. This is Marcus Garvey. FBI targeted. U.S. organization led by Mulana Karinga. This cultural, he was somebody who they sent to infiltrate. So they have all of these resources that they'll put into targeting black organizations who are actually doing things in the community that wouldn't just benefit the black community. It would benefit America. It would benefit the whole area, the extended community. But they're targeting and still do those who are actually doing things that could be better for society and criminalizing basically just our existence. Meanwhile, there's global sex trafficking networks, national syndicates called the Boy Scouts that are doing institutional to the point to where they bankrupt themselves. levels of pedophilia. Get away with it for decades. You got Epstein cats who ain't even been arrested, charged, convicted. So it's over criminalizing one versus neglecting to actually administer justice on the other side of the game. So this 1352 is just cap. I already showed you that the numbers are faulty. But then when you actually put it in the context and you start really looking at other layers, then you realize it couldn't be true. And you realize the real culture of the real criminal culture is not us. What else we got? Hold up real quick. Yeah. I think that's it. I don't think there's more I need to say. 1350 is a myth. The real culture of crime is not us, it's them. They're projecting when they say these things. It's all projection. It's gaslighting. It's deflection. It's propaganda. And they have a whole apparatus to disperse this propaganda, hence why independent black media is here to set the narrative straight. I'm going to go ahead and end it with me. Let's end it with me.
Okay, earlier you was talking about control our own narrative as African people, Israelite. Could you give me a good example of that?
That's a good question. So I know a lot of people are familiar with terms like black on black crime. Black on black crime is a term typically used to undermine the legitimate cries of justice when typically when a police officer murders an unarmed black woman, man, or child. So they use the statistics of black on black crime without putting in proper context. So the proper context would be that all people commit homicides pretty much against their own people at the same rate. It's an environment issue. It's not that black people are predisposed to be violent or hate each other. It's an environment issue. So white people kill white people at the same rate. Asian people kill Asian people at the same rate. Hispanic people kill Hispanics at the same rate, but we never hear white on white crime. We never hear Asian on Asian crime or Hispanic on Hispanic crime. We only hear black on black crime. So that's a narrative that definitely needs to be told in proper context. Also, there's misleading information that comes out in regards to how many black men are in prison versus how many black men are in college. A lot of people have heard the narrative that there are more black men in prison than in college, but that's simply not true. There are actually, according to the numbers, if you check the statistics, the prison statistics, and the way those against the Department of Education statistics, what you'll find is there's actually twice as many black men in college than in prison. So these are things that we sometimes run with because we're getting a perspective from someone who has an agenda, like I spoke about before. So if you have an agenda to keep prisons filled up or to share a certain narrative, then, you know, the numbers will be skewed. And sometimes you can take statistics that are true statistics, but you